do is just go into some Q&A sessions. So you've really got a panel of industry experts here. Just by way of introduction, Simon on my extreme right is Workplace Design Director for Woods Bagot. I'm sure that's the wrong title, but you know what I mean.
That'll do.
So Simon was deeply involved in the Macquarie project, so he's fully conversant with what happened there. So let's see if we can get stuck in. Let me get the ball rolling. Why banks? With the exception of the government story that we heard today and the evolution in workplace, these moves seemingly are dominated by the banking industry. Could you give me some insight from each of your individual perspectives on why you feel that may be, and you know, are the opportunities different for other sectors?
Too easy.
Oh, come on, I'm being nice to you.
Banks have got the money.
It gets worse. Yeah.
Banks have got the money to invest in first instance, so that's, you know, let's keep that in mind. But what we noticed also overseas as well as here is that there's a lot of competition in the financial industry. So there are they truly focus on, you know, what are the different ways how we can do things differently to get a competitive leading advantage. What we also notice is that, and it's already happening in Australia now as well, it started off with Macquarie Bank, and it almost sounds like, you know, everyone is doing it now, that these banks are looking at each other. And the key question, I think, is every time when you do it, are you copy-pasting something that you've experienced somewhere else and that you think, you know, it will bring you up to a benchmark? Or are you truly going back to, okay, do we want to lead the way, and do we really want to set the bar to a next level? So I think the banks, from a Veldhoen and company perspective, were also the easiest one to target when we wanted to make the step from Netherlands to Australia, because we had most experience in that industry, so that helped a lot. So that's my background to it. Yeah.
I think from an ANZ perspective, I think banking is very competitive. That's the one thing. And you know, I think we also recognise that customers' expectations and the breadth of the, you know, global currencies now, people have different expectations of their banking and finance services. So they want all their, you know, that there is a greater expectation now of customer service. I come in, I have my relationship manager, I expect to speak to one person across a range of products, and therefore it's imperative for the banks and the way they operate to become more collaborative, to be team-driven, to respond to clients' needs. So I think from an ANZ perspective, that's definitely something I'm sure has shaped our need to collaborate just in response to expectations of the customer. Okay.
Simon,
I'd say, well, why banks? I mean, Interpolis was insurance.
Financial industry, yeah.
And we're
owned by the Rabobank, by the way. So.
Yeah, by Rabobank, but we've seen that actually insurance should be one of the first steps. They're out in the market a lot. So the idea of flexible desking is something they picked up early on. It definitely wasn't going to be lawyers, and I'm surprised banking took it on so quickly, being cellularized, or majority of it cellularized, but it's come very quickly across to that ABW style environment or flexible working. Consultants, I mean, McKinsey actually almost do the opposite. So they go back to say, well, actually, you know, if it makes you happy to have your desk, then have your desk. We're not going to take it away from you. We know you're traveling, you're working long hours, you're in the client's offices. When you come back, there's a sense of home, and we've all talked about sort of nesting in home and your home base and things like that. So that's a big part of it. So I'm surprised that the consultant side of things hasn't taken off a little bit more.
Well, I've got an answer for you on that one, is that the banks, primarily the banks who are in retail banking pick this up, not necessarily the investment banks. And that is that traditionally retail banking, they've got bigger teams. And those teams have to work with other parts of the business. And in investment banks, and also in a consultancy organization like McKinsey, you've got normally very small teams who have to focus on one key project in a very short term and have to turn that around in an effective way. So for them, you could argue that there's a different dynamic to what teamwork means, and it's on a smaller scale than what you find in the banks.
I think to that end, sometimes the physical environment can replace what can't be done in organisational structuring. So when you're wanting to remove silos, there's only so many structures that you can look at, and most of them, if you've got large employee bases, will still result in some level of silo mentality. With a physical environment, if you can create opportunities for the bump space, for the collaboration, for the interaction, for the creation of a virtual team without cost, then that can start to erode the silo mentality and break that down. So I think we're doing, the physical can do the job that sometimes we can't do from an organisational structuring position.
Excellent. So, any questions from the audience at this stage? Okay, we have one out there and followed up by one here.
Hi there, Emile Gibert of Charter Hall. We've heard a lot about the focus on training employees and also middle management on how to manage their people remotely. But what would you say are the essential items that are required from an ExCo or CEO level to ensure the success of a move from traditional workspace to ABW?
Sponsorship.
That was said with
fail.
feeling there.
Without fail.
Genuine sponsorship. I would like to add the word genuine. If you know, we all know that it's quite transparent and how we are being led in organizations. So if as leaders, if we still think that we're in an ivory tower, you know, we fool ourselves. So pretty much what we already do is known by the people in your organization. So if you stand up in, you know, and you're facing your troops, then it needs to be genuine and why you are embarking on a journey like this. So role modeling and everything that comes with that is absolutely key. And I think, you know, GPT was a good example. And at Macquarie Bank, the CEO of that division also set the example. And Will was not joking. You know, the guy is literally sitting in the street and is very approachable to everyone. And he got that pretty much from the start. And I think that is key.
I think it has to work as well. So, you know, a lot of the work you've had, it's not a mandated, even if it's sponsored well, it's not mandated. People, you work with the business units. So I guess it's sponsorship of a kind, but you work with the business units, you understand what works for them and what doesn't. There's no point imposing something on a group, no matter how well sponsored, if it's just going to undo their productivity. So there is that necessary understanding of what really makes sense for them too.
Kate, is there also an element of staying the course? I mean, if you've set along this journey, you can't get cold feet halfway and start backing out. You need to sort of stay the course and ensure the success long term.
I think there is. Well, I don't think it's consciously sort of stay the course we've started, so we have to finish. I think it is that where we have started, in our experience, and it works, people embrace it and it works. So and their preference is to stay the course and continue to work that way. If there was a business group who I'm sure adopted it, they found themselves less productive and wanted to revert to a one-to-one desking arrangement in the context of ANZ, I anticipate that would happen. So I don't think it's a, you know, we're up and running now, you've got to do it. There is this opportunity for you to do it. If you want to do it and it makes sense, we're here to help you do it.
Okay, we had another question, gentleman at the front.
Thank you. Jeff Hayhurst at State Street. Interested in perceptions about resistance to change, and in particular, working in a banking environment. I could imagine that security and perhaps occupational health and safety were a couple of things that challenges you might have had to deal with. Interested in observations on those.
Security for us, less so. OH&S is used as a blocker. So people will put up, but I need to have my special chair, or I couldn't possibly sit in those environments, that's not going to work for me. So that's more speaking to the specialness of an individual. The majority of resistance that we saw was related to loss of status and loss of personal space. There was a fear factor, so fear of the unknown was a big one for us. We were pushed for time, right? So we were doing this really quickly, which meant that there was a lot of information coming thick and fast. So I think one of the keys for us in overcoming the resistance was monitoring the flow and working with our leaders to ensure that they were addressing issues as they came up and not trying to overload their people with information. An early one, and it was probably more in the design space, which is not really my area, was about the Chinese walls, and I mentioned that really briefly, and that was a really big blocker for us. You know, everybody was going to have to be behind a glass wall, and, you know, nobody could possibly have someone else walking through their area. And the way that we overcome that was to actually get some independent advice. Test it. You know, is that the case? And if that is the case, absolutely, we'll do that for you. Turned out not to be the case for most.
Yes. Don't believe all that you hear from your user groups, eh? Any other comments from the
I think
team?
from our perspective, security obviously got improved with clear desk policy. So from an organisational point of view, we've gone from something like 69% to a 93% success rate with clear desk. So people resistant to packing up, mainly because they couldn't see the opportunity of changing their work practices. You know, how am I going to lug all my folders in and out of my locker? Well, actually, you don't. You know, let's look at other solutions of how you can store those documents. Interestingly enough, for us, we try and actually we have a sort of philosophy where we try and play through our client to their customer. And it's interesting, you know, we started a vocabulary of, well, what do you keep, what do you access from a customer point of view versus what do you access from what you kind of are used to and live with in your modus operandi that you've grown to love and know. So by challenging some of that, you know, what do you really keep, what do you really carry around that is important from a customer point of view, you can actually strip down to not a lot really. It's all safely stored electronically.
And working with wireless technologies and people working from home, did you have information security issues or concerns, barriers?
We haven't with our space program. We have our HR people have flexible working, which you can still work with your line manager and do your work from home. But our workplace agenda has really been about utilising the workplace. So it's not so much an issue for us.
Similarly, we had all of that in place already, so that wasn't going to be anything new. The effort actually more went into, I suppose, preparing our leaders for the fact that they were going to be asked that question more often, because we were now providing everyone with the tools that would enable it. So therefore, that wasn't going to no longer be a blocker that managers could use to employ to say, oh no, we'd have to kit you out with this laptop and all the rest of it. They were getting that as their standard kit. So it was more about how do you make it happen, how do you say yes.
It's not a short program either. I mean, Monica's here. NAB have been on this journey for 4 years now, and each time slowly tweak it, slowly get it a little more correct. But it's not a one-size-fits-all, and each time you've got around a rule, there's another one you've got to come to. So the OH&S thing, you have to design within the rules, but also you have to sort of challenge at the edges as well. Otherwise, we'll be back in the 80s.
And some of those issues already exist anyway. You know, we're fooling ourselves if we can, block off anything and any information, because people already, walk away with USB sticks if they really want to. So it's more of a behavioral aspect again, that you have the dialogue with the different teams. How do you want to deal as a team with this situation if we start opening up working from home? What would that mean as a team, and how can we assure that security of information is still in place, instead of trying to enforce that with the physical or the technology.
Other questions? Mark again. We can just, okay. Just down to the front down here, Becky, thanks.
You have to pay now, Mark. This is your fourth one.
Yeah.
I promise this is the last question. I guess today we've seen that a lot of where we're at today is a continuum of things that have happened in the past. So perhaps if I could ask you, or each of the panellists, if they closed their eyes for a second and imagined what their workplaces would be like in 5 to 10 years, what do you think will be different?
So who wants that one then? Yeah, I can see you queuing up for that. Luke, over to you.
Okay. I don't need to close my eyes for that one. Now, it's clearly a trend already happening that we are coming together in the office to collaborate and to learn from each other. So we still need an office to help us to do that, next to what we can do in the virtual environment. But if you focus on trends like we are automating our processes, so there's less paper and there's less processing happening by people. I'm still wondering why we have checks as an example. I think it will disappear in a couple of years' time. What we also see is that we are outsourcing and offshoring some of the simple tasks to overseas. And what we need to do in value, adding value, is really focusing on, okay, what do we add to that, for our clients. So a lot of that processing work will, in the next 5 to 10 years, start disappearing more and more. And what then becomes essential is that how do we leverage off each other's knowledge and expertise that we've got. So that means collaboration. So whereas at the moment most offices are still around 70% is for individual desks, 30% is for collaboration, roughly. I think that will become a 50-50 or even maybe more than that, where we truly come to the office not because I want a single desk. Now I want to work with my team and understand and learn and collaborate.
I'll jump in.
Simon, have a go.
Okay. So one thing that I've heard today quite a bit, and everyone's mentioned it, or they've showed a diagram on the screen, was from Kate's example. You've got 9,800 square metre floor plates.
Yep.
And you broke them down into about 500 square metre chunks. So you were saying about 40 to 50 people are about the right number.
Correct.
For the NAB project, we've taken a 5,000 square metre space, floor plate, broken up into about 8 teams, about 400 square metres. So at the moment, the property and the developers are saying, well, is it large floor plates, small floor plates? What happens in the city? What happens down at Docklands? Obviously, there's a lot of the big banks going down into the Docklands or have been there. I think it's, looking back, I think it's either or. You can go either way. I think in the city, we can have 500 square metre floor plates as long as it's the right type of floor plate, column-free as much as possible, and as long as it's connected. Or we can go to the Docklands and we can take a massive great floor plate and chop it up into spaces so that people feel like they have a sense of home, zone, community, wayfinding, a sense of brand, ownership, all that sort of good stuff. So I think that it's not going to be that much different. I think the way that we use the space is going to be different. Yes, technology will keep marching on, but the property guys and the developers who are looking at, well, what's the next floor plate going to look like? I think we can do both. With people moving, being more agile around the space, we need to connect it more. And I think the refurbishment of the buildings is going to give us the type of floor plate that we can have for the next 15, 20 years.
Mm. We will need less, though. You probably don't want to hear this, but I'm still a big believer. If I look at what it has done in the last 20 years in the Netherlands, and I'm not saying that the Netherlands, different development as a country to Australia, where you guys are at the moment. But in the Netherlands, there is almost 20% of offices are empty at the moment. So it really has become, in that sense, a public question. What do we do with these office buildings? And there are even now city councils who say to developers, now we don't want you to build anything new. Just start focusing first on what we've got, refurbish that before you get any approval for building new things. So I'm not saying that is exactly the same thing that will happen here. Different, nation, different way of how the economy is going. But I won't, be surprised if it's slightly going in the same direction.
I think my take on that is echo that in terms of I think we will need less space. I'm not sure it's 5 years, but I think when you get that generation come through that are absolutely connected through their technology, couldn't imagine living without it, you've got a very different, I think that's the generation that clearly break down that whole differentiator between work and home. Their life is all one for them. So why would you would only probably go to a space to meet colleagues or if you're having some kind of client interaction maybe. I think the need for space when that generation comes through, space I think will take on a very different profile.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, any more questions from the audience at all? We have one more and then another one further back.
Hi there, it's Karen Hovenga from WSP Built Ecology. A question for Vanessa and Kate. There was a lot of talk this morning about digital natives and this whole age differentiation, etc. And Vanessa, you mentioned that you'd done a lot of survey work about this flexible work styles. And I was just interested to know if there were age differences, but also gender differences in the level of acceptance of this style of working and I guess in productivity improvements as well.
Well, I'm going to put myself out there and say no on the generational one. We had expected that early on, and you see it in pockets, but what we saw was more prevalent was differentiators between the type of worker that we were dealing with. So there would be one experience for some of our more strict finance financial and risk guys to what our IT guys were experiencing to how HR was adopting to what business development was doing. On gender, not specifically. I would say that some of our female leaders, and again, it's probably not, I wouldn't say it's a strong enough indicator to hold. Did they lead better? Possibly. You know, I think there was less status driven, perhaps, so that was probably an area. But on the whole, I'd divide it more by the type of worker than their age. And we've got a broad mix of employees, so some of our best adopters were boomers. You know, they were just so ready.
We can be surprising sometimes, you know.
Yeah, you know, and then equally we've got some Gen Y that have got huge expectation about what they're going to receive when they hit the workforce. Yeah, I'd say no.
Kate, any top